Hello, I am Peter Okwocha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. Humanity's existence is at stake if urgent action isn't taken against climate change. That's a stark warning as an international summit on the issue gets underway.
I'm here in Madrid for the climate conference to understand why Africa, one of the least polluting regions in the world, bears some of the greatest burdens of climate change.
A dramatic rescue in Kenya after a man was trapped by raging water for 3 days with heavy rain predicted for the region. Shoppers are being encouraged to bag last-minute online bargains today on Cyber Monday. But just how profitable is Africa's e-commerce industry? Also on the program, mapping Makoko. It's one of the most difficult areas to navigate in Lagos, but finally, one of the city's largest slums is being put on the map. And in sports, the Ballon d'Or is taking place in Paris with these two African stars on the shortlist. But who will be crowned winner? Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The point of no return is in sight when it comes to climate change, and something needs to be done fast. That's according to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as world leaders began meeting in Madrid, Spain today for the Climate Change Conference, or COP25. This year's meeting has a real sense of urgency. 2019 has undoubtedly seen the issue raised to the top of the global agenda. But experts say some of the world's biggest polluters like China, India and the United States are not doing enough to reduce emissions. And it's hard to feel that Africa isn't being shortchanged in the deals being worked out. The continent contributes to less than 10% of global carbon emissions, yet 7 out of 10 countries most threatened by climate change in the world are African. The charity Save the Children says 16 million African children are at emergency levels of food insecurity due to cyclones and droughts. And across the Horn of Africa, 1.8 million children are thought to have been displaced by drought in the first 6 months of this year. Well, let's join my colleague Pierre-Antoine Denis, who is at the conference for us. Pierre-Antoine, are African voices being heard at this conference?
For the moment, Peter, I have to say the African voices are still finding their feet, to be honest. We have a lot of African booths from different countries in the world. There is a beautiful South African booth, the Rwandan booth as well, focused on a green Rwanda. We have Tunisia as well that are here, and you also have a lot of international organizations that are here to promote what they do for the world, but also for Africa, because obviously, as you just said, Peter, Africa, although not being responsible for most of the carbon emissions in the world, yet 7 out of the 10 countries most threatened by climate change are Africans. And one of the reasons behind this striking study is that the amount of carbon emissions that are being spread every year is way too important. This contributes to a rise in temperatures, and obviously it affects the climate. And obviously the coal extraction and the fossil fuels extractions needs to be changed, as Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, pointed out today. Years of drought across huge areas of Africa have resulted in these scenes in Zimbabwe. And scientists say it is a glimpse of far worse to come as the world gets hotter, putting millions of people under pressure. At the other end of the scale, extreme weather has devastated parts of Kenya, Tanzania and Mozambique this year alone, leaving millions at emergency levels of food insecurity due to floods, landslides and cyclones. It's the gases blasted into the air by power stations and industries that are raising temperatures, and despite all the warnings over the decades, the world keeps adding more. The head of the United Nations says the trends are going in the wrong direction.
This is why we need to put a lot of pressure in order to increase ambition and in order to reverse the present trend in which, unfortunately, climate change is running faster than what we are, and with the risk at a relatively short amount of time to become irreversible, that we will not be able to contain the temperature rise.
His big worry is that huge investments are still being made in fossil fuels. China is just one of many countries expanding its use of coal. Over the weekend in Germany, protesters invaded a coal mine. In many countries, governments support their most polluting industries. The UN Secretary General says that makes the impact of climate change even more damaging.
It's time to stop subsidies to fossil fuels, because what is dramatic is that we are using taxpayers' money, our money, to boost hurricanes, to melt glaciers, to destroy corals, to create all the negative impacts of climate change.
He was speaking amid final preparations for the UN Climate Summit, which got underway today in Madrid, and there will be some tough negotiations. It is pretty striking to see how the head of the UN is prepared to be so blunt with the governments that are meeting here by telling them you can make all the plans you want on tackling climate change, but by burning more coal, you're actually making things worse. This climate change conference, or COP25 as it's being called, gives African countries yet another opportunity to speak out about its needs on how to combat this global scourge that looks likely to hit the continent the worst. The argument is that the world needs to act on climate now, and to do that successfully, Africa needs to get its voice heard. And one of the voices that is actually trying to make himself heard is Mitika Mwenda. You are the Executive Director of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Mr. Mwenda, first questions. What are the key issues that needs to be discussed in this COP25 regarding Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, the most emotive issue here, which will make or break this COP25, is the Article 6, which is concerned about markets and how the international corporations and the governments are going to address the issue of markets. So this is very important for us, particularly in Africa, where how the issue of carbon markets has not evolved, it collapsed. And the most impacted people, particularly from the Congo Basin and the Congo countries, rely on forest. And then they are providing these things, and it has not ever come clear how this is going to be balanced by the rights of the people.
But African leaders will come to this conference, obviously.
Yes.
Will they have a unified voice, or will they have a common message that goes beyond their own country but for the whole African continent?
The primary position of Africa is paramount, and that is what unifies the entire of African continent. So we have a position under the African group of negotiators, actually, which is very radical. And what we want here is we are looking for Africa to be considered as a region with special circumstances and needs under the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the NDCs.
Actually, you were talking about that Paris Agreement. Is it realistic for African countries right now to hit those targets when we know there are other problematics, other problems affecting the continent? Is it realistic right now?
It is completely not realistic, and that's why you can hear we are reopening them, our NDCs commitments across Africa, and the next year, which is the watershed here for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, you realize that each African country has asked for the review. Because when the NDCs were being done, they were done hurriedly and submitted hurriedly. So they are not realistic to the circumstances and the needs of the individual countries. So they have realized that they are unimplementable. That's why next year will be about review so that we can resubmit them.
Mr. Mitika Mwenda, thank you very much for analysis. Peter, back to you, but obviously we will stay here all week and the week after to to keep track of what is happening in the negotiations that are happening here in Madrid for this COP25.
Thank you.
Pierre-Antoine Denis there in Madrid. Well, as he said earlier in his report, Kenya is one of the countries that has been hit by floods. And just today, Kenyan police have made a dramatic rescue of a local fisherman who had been stranded on a tiny patch of land after heavy floods hit the country. Vincent Musila had gone fishing on Friday on a river in central Kenya when it burst its banks following torrential rains, which left him stranded. Emmanuel Gunza now reports.
It's the dramatic moment that police rescued local fisherman Vincent Pusila. He had been stranded here for 3 days after a river burst its banks in central Kenya, marooning him to this small island. Dozens of villagers held vigils on the other side of the bank, some even attempting to throw him food. But it was only on Sunday the police chopper got to him.
I had gone to the river to fish on Friday when the flood waters came in suddenly. There was no sign of floods earlier. Within seconds, water was everywhere and I could not cross the river. It's been terrible being stranded here in the cold and rain. I was hungry and went through a lot. There were so many mosquitoes and I was afraid of animals like crocodiles and hippos. But I am so happy and feel well after such a dramatic rescue. I feel like I am reborn again.
Kenya has borne the brunt of the weekend's weather. At least 3 people were killed by floods in the east of the country. Several rivers burst their banks with bridges swept away following the heavy rains. Entire villages in western, eastern and central Kenya have been destroyed by floods and landslides, forcing emergency services to evacuate people to safer grounds. The government says at least 120 people have died in the country since the onset of rains in October. Emmanuel Gunza, BBC News, Nairobi.
Well, the heavy rains are continuing to bring death and destruction to East Africa. As we mentioned, at least 3 people have been killed in Kenya over the past 2 days and 7 died in Tanzania. So what are the weather patterns in the region over the next couple of days? Here's the BBC's Susan Powell to tell us more.
Through the weekend, both Kenya and Tanzania saw some devastating storms. These bright white clouds showing where the thunderheads developed across the plains. Our eye now, though, is drawn further east to this circulation up here in the Arabian Sea, which looks like it will bring some further heavy rainfall into Somalia, which has already been badly affected by flooding recently, especially into the northern half of the country. And this area of showers further south to the north of Madagascar and its outer bands, which look like they will feed some heavy rain again into coastal Kenya and Tanzania. And then further south still, a very intense weather front is set to bring a deluge into the eastern half of South Africa through the remainder of the week ahead. So we're certainly not out of the woods in the coming days in terms of further heavy rainfall. For Nairobi, I suspect we will see some significant totals, 100, 150 millimetres, for example, as we go through the coming 5 days. Also for Arusha and for Johannesburg. And what a drop in temperatures too, as that potent weather front swings through Tuesday into Wednesday.
Susan Powell there. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, he says he's been waiting for a moment to show what he can do following a spectacular weekend for Nigerian international Kelechi Iheanacho. Mino will have more in sports. I'm Peter Okwoche. You're watching Focus on Africa. Now, following on from Black Friday, it's Cyber Monday today, a day for shoppers to bag last-minute online bargains. But how many of you decided to shop online? With technology and logistical challenges on the continent, it's not an option for everyone. So just how profitable is Africa's e-commerce industry? Well, Jumia, Africa's largest online shopping platform, it's often referred to as Africa's Amazon. The company has 4 million customers on a continent where just 1% of retail sales are made online. It was the first tech startup from Africa to float on the New York Stock Exchange in March this year, but due to major losses, it's had to close its operations in Tanzania and Cameroon. So, what's the solution? Peter Ndiangwi is the founder of GoBeba, an online shopping platform. Peter, thanks for joining us. Just how would you sum up Africa's e-commerce industry?
Thank you, Peter. I think what I would say is that the e-commerce industry in Africa is pretty robust at the moment. I think even to answer that question, I would answer the question, which is there a need for people to shop online? Is there a need for people to shop remotely and get their goods delivered to them? And the answer is an affirmative yes. That is continuing to grow significantly in Africa, not just Sub-Saharan Africa, but actually the entire Africa, including North Africa. So I think the industry robust. Maybe
But
the
Peter,
next part of that is...
You say the industry is robust, but when we look at the biggest player on the continent, Jumia, for instance, they seem to be having problems and closing offices in Cameroon and Tanzania.
Exactly. So I wanted to go to that point now, that it's robust and growing, but are there challenges? Yeah, significant challenges. And if I was going to talk about those challenges, I would group them into three key things. One is what you alluded to earlier, which is what we could call infrastructure challenges, like logistics. The other one is structural, and economists would say this based on just the income per capita in African countries. So if you look at that, only a certain percentage of a population would probably access e-commerce services that have been derived in a copy and paste model from the West, whether it's Europe or the United States. And that brings me to the third challenge, which is then if you have those kind of structural and infrastructure challenges, then what is the right business model to be able to tackle those challenges and emerge out with a profitable business? And I think the early days are not going to be profitable, but I think there has to be a clear path to profitability. And I think that's what investors are questioning about Jumia, for example.
Well, Jumia definitely not here to defend themselves. But then what exactly are the solutions? Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but what are the solutions to these key issues that you've brought up?
I think the key issue that the business or investor can control is the business model that they choose to go to the market with. And I think there lies the solution. The other challenge, which I think also has investors to actually take a bit of blame, is impatient capital. And impatient capital coming in the form of grow very, very quickly so that we can see a return. But this is a market that actually requires to be developed. So requires much more patient capital that is patient enough to wait not just for the returns, but also not to buy growth that is artificial. And so to answer your question on what are some of the solutions to this is the business model needs to align with the landscape of Africa. And for example,
if
Peter,
you look at why people... Peter, we will have to leave it there because we are indeed running out of time. Peter Ndiangwi, the founder of the online shopping platform GoBeba, thank you very much for your time. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. We had to keep some time for some sports.
I know. Thank you for that, Peter. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, in just over an hour's time, the Ballon d'Or takes place in Paris. It's sure to be a glitzy award affair with big names in football descending on the French capital. There are 5 African contenders on the 30-man shortlist for the Men's Footballer of the Year. These 2 Liverpool players, Egypt's Mohamed Salah and Senegal's Sadio Mane, have been nominated. Mane's Senegalese countryman Kalidou Koulibaly is on it, as well as Arsenal's Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Manchester City's Riyad Mahrez. The usual suspects of Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, as well as Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk, are seen as some of the favourites to possibly pick up the award. And for the women's category, no African female player made the shortcut, but 4 women from the U.S. team have made the list. Megan Rapinoe from the Women's World Cup winning squad from this summer is one of the strong contenders to pick up the award. And moving on, Nigeria international Kelechi Iheanacho says he's been waiting for an opportunity to show what he could do. His comments come after he scored the stoppage time winner for Leicester City against Everton on Sunday. Iheanacho, who was named man of the match, has struggled for game time in the squad this season. He says his hard work in training is paying off. Hard work always does pay off. It seems like it's not just the English Premier League that has been parting with managers lately. The opening group stages of the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations has claimed 2 coaches. It's been just a week since the first 2 group matches were concluded, but Eswatini have decided not to renew the contract of their coach, Costa Papic. While for Sudan, they have also parted with Zlatko Lakaurisic. He will not get an extension on his deal either. To athletics, where Uganda's Joshua Cheptegei no doubt is still in a celebratory mood after he broke the 10-kilometer road world record in Valencia over the weekend, setting a new time of 26 minutes and 38 seconds. He's had a pretty good year. The 23-year-old broke the previous record by 6 seconds, which was set in 2010 by Kenya's Leonard Common. The Ugandan athlete was crowned the 10,000-meter world champion in Doha in October, having won the 10-kilometer cross-country world title in Denmark in March. That's all the sport, Peter.
Good stuff, Mimi. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, we use maps every day to figure out where we are and where we're going. But what if your address or school isn't listed? That's the problem facing thousands of Nigerians living in the huge slum of Makoko in Lagos. But that's all about to change, as Celestina Olulode now reports.
Home to around 300,000 people, welcome to Makoko, a floating slum in the Nigerian megacity of Lagos. Officially, this part of the city does not exist. You won't find this labyrinth of dwellings marked out on any city maps, but that's all about to change. Armed with their location tracking smartphones, these teams crisscross the waterways, gathering vital data from drones to help create an accurate map of the area. And it's also a chance to get more of the residents, especially women, into work.
We're going around with a team made up of girls from Makoko to actually collect points of interest within their neighborhood, within their houses, to put this on the map so we can have multi-layers of points of interest on this map. So we can see the streets and have easy navigation, and all of this can be on the map for free.
Every point of interest is carefully entered into the system, like Watamabo, a floating barbershop.
So we're putting your barbing salon on the map. Yeah, to be part of the points of interest that people will see. When they look at Makoko map, they will see Watamabo.
Makoko residents don't only live off the map. They rarely hold property deeds either. And that means they live with the permanent threat of eviction. In 2012, at least one person was killed when police evicted residents. Authorities stressed the waterway dwellings were illegal and dangerous. So mapping these homes is a step towards cementing people's place here.
Before, in Makoko, we were in the dark. But now, with the work you have done, us traditional chiefs can see that you have done a good job. We are only fishermen. We didn't know how to mark out the different neighborhoods. We are very happy.
The map is now ready to go online, giving the area a new perspective. Celestina Olulode, BBC News.
Very interesting stuff. And a few years ago, someone actually built a school on water in that area. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, that's all from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.